there's no such thing as a maths person. You're not born a maths person or not. And that speed isn't important. So it doesn't matter how fast you do maths. It matters about that conceptual understanding and really delving deep and thinking.
Welcome to the Future of Learning, where innovation meets education.
Welcome. Today we're joined by Lauren Gardner, who is a math support teacher and someone who is going to offer a fresh perspective on mathematics and hopefully undo some of our mathematics trauma along the way. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, can you describe and explain your journey of how you came to loving and eventually studying maths?
I suppose at college and in my childhood, I found maths was probably the thing that came easiest to me. It was something that made sense, and it had rights and wrongs, and it had strategies to do things. Whereas English, in my view, there was too many ways that you could go, and it was all to do with interpretation and things like that. Which I found later on that maths has a lot to do with that as well. But when I went to uni, I didn't go into uni feeling like I had a passion for maths, but in my bachelor's degree, I don't really know what happened and when I sort of decided that it was something that I was passionate about. But I think going into schools and working with students and seeing disengagement and just such a difference of ability and skills, I suppose, in those students, just kind of provoked something inside that wanted to give everyone like a fair shot, I guess. So when I finished my degree, I went into a postgrad diploma in maths education. And so that's when I sort of delved a little bit deeper into the maths education world and what was happening, and wanted to understand a little bit more what the sort of pedagogy was around how to teach maths and things like that.
Awesome.
I think it's, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting, Lauren, that you didn't like literacy or English because it's too subjective. But then you later found out that maths is also, it can be subjective, and it doesn't have to be black and white. Can you describe that a little bit more, what you think that is?
I suppose it's to do with the way that people see things. And I think as you go through school and you go through uni, you're like, oh yeah, there's just this one way that you teach things and everybody's going to pick it up that way. And, if you don't pick it up that way, then kind of like, too bad. You don't fit the mold into what we think that maths learning is. So I think now looking back, especially when we get the kids at intermediate, there's so many different ways to look at maths and maths equations and problems and how we attack things. It's definitely a lot more subjective than I had originally thought, and seeing the different students with different ways of seeing things. And I mean, I'm surprised every day with how students see things, and just kind of like blown away that they've seen a different pattern or a different side of something, or, they've uncovered something that I've never even thought about before. Yeah.
And that's been great to see, like that Lauren's shared some activities with us that we've tried in class, and it's just blown my mind too. Just, it's the kind of maths that I wish I was getting taught, that what you bring is actually valuable and not wrong. Because often in my schooling experience, it was either right or wrong. But this opens up so much more avenues, the way that you can sort of show the activities. So it's pretty cool. So lots of people see maths as equations, as worksheets. What do you think maths is all about, or the essence of maths is all about?
I think the true essence of maths is patterns. So I think algebra lies at the base of all mathematics. And I think even just saying that word algebra will freak people out, because I know when I started in my classroom and we're doing algebra and the kids go, oh my God, there's letters and I don't know what's going on. And it's just there's anxiety around that word. But at the heart of maths, it is algebra, it is patterns, it is connections. I think kids come to every different activity thinking it's brand new, because they're not making connections with things that they already know. So the students that kind of find maths a bit harder, I think they don't make those connections without our support. So it's about sort of supporting all students to make connections with what they already know, and that it's not just all brand new and random. like everything is interconnected.
Yeah, and what you were saying before about being black and white or seeing patterns, everyone sees it in a different way.
Mhm.
So when we get taught maths, or when I got taught maths, when I was at school, it was usually the teacher's way of doing it, but there was one very specific way of doing it. And you were marked right or wrong based on, did you understand it the same way that the teacher explained it, and can you repeat it the same way?
Yeah.
And I think that your angle where you're coming from is there's the same equation, there's multiple ways of seeing it, and it's just not, oh, I know how to apply the strategy, therefore you are right and you can pass and you can move up in the curriculum. Is recognizing that not every student has to know the same strategy, as long as they can work it out. Is that, will you say that that's your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to, and like, because I've got the pleasure at the moment of going around quite a few classrooms in our school, and I always sort of try and open up that world of, like I've got a motto that is the more ways that you can be successful, the more kids will be successful. So, if the only way to be successful in maths is getting the right answer fast, then so many kids are not going to be in that box. Whereas if asking a good question or making a good mistake or really like embracing the struggle or those types of things, and if you praise those things and give those, those things status in your classroom, as well as getting, obviously getting the right answers, great eventually. But so many kids disengage because they're like, oh, well, that kid's going to get it faster than me anyway. So like, why am I going to bother, I suppose?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. And I love that motto too. So you mentioned there's some of the misconceptions about maths. So what other misconceptions might there be about maths, and how do we get rid of those misconceptions that are baked into the way we were taught, really?
Do you mean from a teacher's perspective or a child's?
Let's go from a teacher's perspective.
I feel like when I've talked to teachers around maths and teaching maths, a lot of the time it's their content knowledge that sort of halts them, I suppose, in the way that they explore maths, because there's, especially at our intermediate age, they're so scared to be wrong or not know the content that they like avoid or sort of don't engage with it fully. They just kind of cover it and then move on because it's sort of worried that they're high flying kids, or they're kids that are loving maths will just take it too far and they'll be out of their depth.
Yeah. So
I think role modeling not always being right is the way to go. Like not being scared to actually go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not sure. Like how could we find out more, or what as adults what we do. Like if we don't know something, we're gonna ask a friend, we're gonna Google it, we're gonna look at the answer and then work backwards. Like all those problem solving sort of strategies and where to go next. Yeah, I think it's okay to not know all the time.
Yeah, Lauren, I was just going to get sidetracked here a little bit with a statistic that it is relevant. You'll see how. About of all jobs that are out there for teachers, when a teacher goes to apply, they will apply for the ones that are for the junior school and not for the senior school. And the reason being is because teachers are often afraid of teaching maths. Because like you said earlier, it's either you know it or you don't. It's not like English where you can be like, oh, yeah, well, I see it this way. You just sort of like navigate it. Yeah. Maths is right or wrong. But I found that the beauty, and I've been through a journey of relearning maths and relearning how to teach maths. And I've noticed that if you sort of, put all the misconceptions aside and you immerse yourself in the journey, it's so beautiful what you do, because you're actually learning within the students at the same time. Yeah. Because you see a problem, like we said earlier, you see it one way and then a kid will see another way and you're like, oh my God, that's so much quicker.
Yeah.
And it's just, so a lot of the schools actually post jobs and they won't say that it's for high school or intermediate, intermediate or senior end, based on that, because teachers will not apply. So we could here be potentially saving the teachers' shortage in a way.
Yeah.
One podcast at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because of that, teachers do shy away from it, and they might not even spend as long doing it in their classrooms and, that type of thing, because they're like, oh, and a lot of the time it's the first thing that falls off. Oh, like we've run out of time. We'll get rid of maths and, carry on with reading or writing or, other subjects. I feel like maths quite often falls off quite quick.
Yeah, so on that note, if we were to look at how maths is taught from the early years, and if at the end we're producing these kids that have all this trauma and all this pain that comes from doing maths, and with teachers too, what should be the focus in those early years? Is it still times tables? Should that still be, memorizing your times tables as quick as you can and knowing them when you're 5 years old in South Korea? Like, is that where we should start from?
I feel like it's such a hard thing because obviously, as you know, you're in like at our age when we get them, there are kids that are absolutely switched off maths completely. They're like, they're just done. Like, they're not even, like, it's so hard to even get them engaged in anything that you're doing. And I'm like currently at this time looking into doing my some master's research. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'd love to find out what is happening to these students at a young age that's really completely switching them off. But I mean, rote learning your times tables, I mean, some kids are going to pick them up and memorizing them and some kids just aren't. It's just not the way that their brains work. I mean, I say to my students all the time, like, yeah, some of them pop into my head, but I don't know my 12s, but I know my 10s and my 2s, and I go from there. Or, there's some I always have to think about. So it's like, it's a hard one because some kids are always going to be faster than others. And I think about games like I shudder when I go into a classroom and there's them playing like round the world maths. I don't know if you know it, but a kid stands up behind another kid and they get fired a basic facts question, and it's the first one that answers it gets to carry on. So it's literally, usually it's one or two kids that just go around the whole circle and like, cool, those two kids are great at maths. Like, that's the vibe that everyone gets. And the other kids are kind of like, well, why do we bother? Like, why should we engage?
Or there's always a case where a teacher will put the times tables and you get time. Like, how quickly can you complete all the times tables? And next time you have to try and beat your score. It's like, well, how is that going to help me, like, conceptually understand?
That's right, yeah.
And I'm not saying, disclaimer, I'm not saying that kids should not learn the times tables, but it should not be the priority at those early stages where we should perhaps be looking at making them fall in love with maths, or looking at maths in a different way, and not box them into I am not good at maths from such an early age, which often happens. It's so common to talk to students and they're like, I'm not good at maths. Well, actually, you're not good at number, perhaps, at memorizing, but you're good at maths is so much bigger than just times tables. But they get that into the brain so early on, and it's such a shame.
Yeah. So it's really hard to break. And I think I'm the same with you. Times tables are important, right? Because they're part of their toolkit. They mean that they're not putting cognitive load all the time when they're doing other things like fractions, decimals, and percentages in particular, because that's already there. They're not having to think about that too hard to be able to engage with the other content. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. They can't learn from an early age that, if you can't memorize those facts really quickly, that you're bad at math.
Yeah. So one of the things that might sort of aid with those early years and working with kids at the early years of maths is using technology. So what are your thoughts on using technology in maths learning? Is it a powerful tool? Is it a distraction? What do you see it as?
I think there's a lot of different digital programs around, in maths. I feel like it can be engaging and motivating, I find, especially for our age, and it is good for building those basic facts and knowledge and things like that. But then there's also games out there that are, that teachers are using in their classrooms they have maths in them, but very sporadically, and it's basically just them playing a game and doing a sum every now and again that's sort of not at their level, or, it's kind of got nothing to do with them. It's just something that they do. And they love it a lot of the time, but potentially a waste of time.
Yeah, they love the game, not the maths in the
That's
game.
right.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now that we're talking about games, what are your thoughts on using Minecraft for education in maths?
I've actually never used it for maths, which is interesting. I've used Scratch, like I've done coding with maths, which is quite cool because there's lots of geometry stuff that you can do in Scratch, which is pretty cool, tiles and stuff like that. Because I find with geometry and rotation and reflection and all that, it's quite hard for them to be able to manipulate it, without, because I know in times before I've, got a shape and cut it out and put a pin in the corner and turned it round and tried to show them, what's happening when you're rotating something, but it's quite, the kids like, what,
what is this?
That's a very cool digital platform to be able to use sort of manipulatives in a way that and it does engage them because it's in real time. They get to have an investigate. They get to try things. I've actually never tried Minecraft with maths, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I had used it in my class before, and kids absolutely love it. One, because it's Minecraft, of course, and two, because they get to see things that perhaps, even though they're not manipulating, it's kind of how they learn these days anyway. They understand the concept of the video game, and so they can relate it. We're not sponsored by Minecraft, but it's really, you can also collaborate in there, and I think it's got a space, at least just as a task, to when you're doing your rotations. It's quite a powerful, and Scratch, I hadn't even thought of Scratch until you mentioned now how you can use rotations and reflections. That's another really good tool.
Yeah, and I flash back to a couple of years ago when I saw you do it in the classrooms when you were moving around teaching digital stuff to the kids. Like the kids were real into it, and they made me think, oh man, I've got to upskill myself so I can do it this way, because it's so much more interesting than a AWS maths worksheet,
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty with my position though. The last 2 years I've been doing postgraduate, papers and reading about learning and then working with groups of kids just learning about maths. So I've been reading maths, teaching maths, reflecting on maths, it's been maths, where I haven't had writing and reading and topic and floating around in my head as well. So it's been great because I've been able to experiment with so many different ways in that small group setting. It's a completely different ballgame when you've got it into the classroom, but it's given me a lot of time to reflect on what things engage kids, what motivates them. Just using different ideas.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking of, we'll have teachers listening that might not have any idea about the types of activities that you might roll out with your kids. So could you give us an example of one or two activities that you might model in a classroom that might showcase some of this? I know it might be hard to explain, but is there anything that you...
one of my go-tos is bingo, good old bingo, but it's quite good because you can modify it in any kind of way and you can go as far as you want. And yes, there are basic facts involved, but it's a lot about strategy and seeing patterns and noticing things. And I think kids don't necessarily naturally notice and wonder things because a lot of the time they're getting spoon-fed strategies like we talked about earlier, like the strategy the teacher was teaching, and then they've got to regurgitate that. And why would I bother doing any thinking? Because really they're just remembering and, giving back. But I feel like the bingo game I play, it's like you draw a grid, like a square with 9 squares in it, and they choose their numbers. So I tell them what dice I'm going to roll. So like today I did it with my class. I rolled 2 10-sided dice, and they had to add the numbers together. And so they had to write the sums in the grid. And then they get 3 in a row, then a full grid. So obviously the first time around they do it, and people have got 2 in there and 20 and, 18 and, these numbers that are not impossible to get, but it's unlikely that they're going to come up. So it takes ages to get our first, full grid bingo. And then I talk to them about what did they notice and what did they wonder, like during that activity. And they're like, oh my God, there were so many 11s, I didn't even have an 11 in my grid, And so the second time they do it, they have a think about it, and we talk about combinations and why would you have that. And obviously you can use it with multiplication as well and talk about factors and products. And I think I like to intertwine all those subject specific words in a way that's interesting, because you can say this is a product, or this is a sum, this is a factor, and they're going, those are all words and I don't know what that is. And so try and use those technical sort of words as much as I can. That's a go-to. But I always I love to do the dot talks or the quick images as well. And that's all about looking for patterns that naturally occurs, like literally just a card with dots on it, and it's usually in some kind of pattern, but we all see the pattern differently. And then I asked them how they saw the pattern, and they love sharing it about it, because they can all be successful. So they're like we're into this, and they share with a partner, and then they share with the whole class. And these are, teachers will say to me, "Oh my God, I can't believe that kid shared. They never talk in maths," or they, they're so disengaged that they're just not, they don't want to talk about anything because they're just so worried they're going to get it wrong. So it goes back to that different ways of seeing patterns. So nobody saw it in the right way. Everyone saw a different pattern, but none are more right or wrong than others. They're just how we saw them. And then that's kind of what maths is. So I sort of try and look, my main things when I'm thinking about an activity to do is engagement, an activity that everyone can be successful. Yeah, so put the status not on just the brightest kids, because sometimes it's the kids that struggle with maths that see a real cool pattern. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a cool pattern, It's quite cool.
Yeah, that's true. And when you're talking about that images one, I flashed back to a kid last year after he showed it to us in a staff meeting. Went back to our class and did it, and it was patterns, and we had shared, every kid had, put their hand up to share, and we had all shared. And then one kid, they shared all the different ways of seeing something, and one kid was like, I see a butterfly. And then we all looked at it and we were like, and then he came up and drew it, and we were like, oh, it's a butterfly. And it was like, that kid was went back to his seat real chuffed with himself and real proud that he'd seen something, which built up the status, which is really cool.
Yeah. And it is putting the status on those things. I feel like moving away from in my classrooms, I never have hands up. I have thumbs. So the thumbs only I can see. I mean, sometimes the others can obviously see them, but I always talk about, if someone's got their hand up, waving it around, and you're trying to think about the question or whatever, whatever it is that you're doing, you just got instantly oh, well, they've already got it. The teacher's going to pick them because they've got their hand up first. It's I'm done.
Yeah. It's so true.
Also, not having hands up encourages everyone to be engaged.
Yes.
Because if you're not likely to want to answer math because you don't like maths or you think you're not good, you're just I won't put my hands up. Someone else is going to answer. It's just in the next 40 minutes, I'm out of break, morning tea, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But if you don't know whether the teacher's coming for you, you actually need to be engaged.
Yeah.
And you might just by default, you might just pick up a thing or two that you wouldn't have otherwise, because those kids would have shut down. So their no hands policy is a great policy to have in any class, in any subject. But I feel math is such an important one because so many kids just don't want to do it.
Yeah. And I think the good old think, peer, share. I mean, it's old school, but I think it works. You ask the question, you give thinking time, you get them to share with a friend, and then you come back to a whole class, that. And I always go around and just listen into what I'm hearing, or listening into my groups talking about whatever it is. But you just get, and you've got the kids that won't share in front of the whole class, but in that think, peer, share, they're like, oh yeah, I've got this.
And Lauren, what are your thoughts on collaboration and problem solving in a group setting?
Yeah, I think.
Do you do much of that?
I do, yeah. So we, at our school, we went through the DMIC journey. I mean, developing mathematical inquiry communities. It was right back at the start of my teaching career, so maybe 2011-ish. So we spent years working with the facilitators around developing those communities. It was an interesting time because there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of teachers that were not comfortable with how open that could get, and where it could go with the students. And going back to what I said earlier, they were afraid that it was going to go somewhere that they didn't know, what was happening. But we had a great staff where we worked through the problems on a Monday night or afternoon at our meeting, and then we would see where all our staff would take different things. And then when we went into the classroom on the Tuesday and we're doing it with our kids, it was most of the things had sort of popped up, so we knew what the misconceptions might be, the different ways that it could take, and where we wanted to sort of focus on. So, I mean, I was humming and hawing about it when I first was introduced to it, and I could see the flaws, I think, more than I could see the benefits back then, because we had students in my class that were working at level 1 and some were working at level 5, and they were saying mixed ability groupings. And it was kind of to me, it's a recipe for disaster. Like, how's that going to work? A level 5 student working with a level 1 student, it doesn't work. So we trialed things where it was kind of like the levels weren't too far apart and that type of thing. So it was mixed ability to a point.
Controlled.
Yeah, controlled mixed ability. Yeah. But in my small groups where the levels were all quite similar, we did a lot of problem solving. I think the thing with problem solving too, and I found it myself, because as teachers, we get into teaching because we want to help students. So when they're struggling, it's like our instant, it's like a gut reaction that we want to rescue them and just, tell them what it is because they're struggling. But I think working on talking to students about the struggle and that it's a good thing, and that to try and be comfortable in the struggle, and as teachers, it's okay that they're struggling. It's a good thing that they're struggling, because then at least we're getting some brain growth. But it's interesting. And I think in my last couple of years of study, because I did some papers that Roberta Hunter was leading, so I did lots of study around the principles that underpin that kind of idea of solving maths problems. And after doing the study and seeing why we do things how we do them, I think I was a lot more not accepting, but a lot more positive about that approach to learning.
Yeah, I've done it in my class. We had to run it as a school. We did some PD and we had to do mixability. And we all face challenges. All teachers voice their concerns. The two things that were highlighted for me were, one, is that sometimes the kids that you will say were not academic or that gifted at maths will surprise you because of what we were saying earlier. They will see things in a different way. And those kids that you will say, they will get it easy because in that problem setting, it wasn't just a process that they just had to follow from top to bottom. They will struggle more. So it was really interesting dynamics. Obviously, it didn't always work, but I have seen it work and be really successful with some students. But again, I think it goes back to the teacher's nature ability of we need to be in control. So if I don't know what's going to happen, or if I don't know exactly the next step, and I can teach you the next step, I may look like I don't know what I'm talking about. And the older the kids are, the more self-conscious the teacher becomes.
Yes.
So I think it has to be in my opinion, my humble opinion, just a shift in mentality from teachers, right?
Yeah, I think so. And then at the same time, though, it's hard. I feel like it would be really hard for beginning teachers to do maths in that way, because I feel like me going into a problem like that, I've got so much knowledge about the misconceptions students are going to bring and what I'm going to see, because I've seen it time and time again, that I can imagine that'd be quite scary or daunting to do it in that way for a beginning teacher that's not got that sort of knowledge of students behind them.
How do we support a beginning teacher then to come into a classroom and teach in this way and not let them fall back in the old habits of teaching maths in the more traditional style?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, because I think it can go for beginning teachers and others that are reluctant to take on that style of teaching as well. I don't know if I can answer that question, if I'm honest, because it's a lot of work, right, to go behind that, because they've got to be doing it from when they start their degree. Like, that's kind of how they need to be seeing it and observing it, because they're going to be going into classrooms at all different schools where, they might go into a school doing prime maths as their whole maths program, and then they go into a school that's doing mathematical communities, and it's just so vastly different that it would be hard. It would be really hard to set them up like 100% for that type of teaching, I guess. And I think, I struggle to answer that question, because I actually I have thought about it, because as a math support teacher in our school last year, I was like, how can I best support these teachers to teach in this way and be comfortable to teach in that way? Yeah.
There's lots to undo and lots to get people away from what they know as normal and safe. So to even bring it, I think you'd have to go back to university and see what they're teaching as maths there. And I can only remember what I learned at university from doing papers. I can't remember what the papers were about, but I only remember doing papers to pass the maths paper. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't think I learned how to teach maths. I think I learned about maths.
Yes.
And the sort of pedagogy around maths, but not actually learning to see maths in the way that it should be seen.
I think so too.
Did you learn your timetables?
I think I as a child, I didn't get dinner until I knew my times tables. So there was brutal Zimbabwean parenting there.
I think teachers are comfortable with how they learned as well. So what they remember of being taught maths, if they're a teacher, potentially they were okay at it. And they just kind of fall back on that potentially as well. Not even what they see at uni learning or...
And so if, like, let's just have a hypothetical here. If you had, let's say, a student sitting in front of you and a teacher sitting next to that student, and both of them struggle with maths, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would you say to them, or multiple pieces of advice?
The teacher or the student?
Well, either one. You can start with the student. What would you say to the student that says, I struggle with maths, Miss Gardner?
Oh gosh, I feel like there's so much to it. I mean, I love, there's a video, Jo Bowler's made a video, and it's the 4 key, she's called it 4 key messages. Because obviously if you've studied anything to do with maths education, Jo Bowler is in everything and everything that she does. And she's just incredible. And she's linked, obviously, research from, however long she's been researching, and other people with like brain science and how our brains actually work and this type of thing. So, and she talks a lot about mindset as well. And obviously Carol Dweck has talked a lot about mindset and maths. But there's 4 key messages. So the 4 key messages are: believe in yourself. And I mean, that's hard to do when you don't. It's like, just believe in yourself. You'll be great. But believe in yourself. Struggle and mistakes are good. They're not, they're not a bad thing. There's no such thing as a maths person. You're not born a maths person or not. And that speed isn't important. So it doesn't matter how fast you do maths. It matters about that conceptual understanding and really delving deep and thinking. So those are the 4 key. I show the video to classes when I go in there. It's only 8 minutes long. It's quite a quick snapshot. Michael Jordan's in it because he talks about failure. He's been trusted to take the game-winning shot, 36 times and missed, and it's like, imagine if he missed one of those and just left basketball, like, I'm done. Like, I suck at basketball. So I sort of, those 4 key messages kind of underpin how I teach maths. And I suppose potentially the same message goes to the teacher. Yeah.
That's great.
Just a lot more support for the teacher, right? Because they have to stand up in front of the class and teach it regardless. Yeah. And I know a lot of schools, I was lucky enough that my previous school, we went through 2.5 to 3 years of training with the same concept. So I've also watched the Jo Bowler videos. Mm-hmm. I know wherever I go, I show the videos to all the kids. And at the beginning, they're like, what? But I think as time goes on, they get it. They start to get it.
Yeah.
So I think time is crucial. You can't just say, all right, let's do this. Let's try for a term. Yeah. And that's it. Let's go back to what we know. You need to build time. And it's just sort of snowballs and grows and you gain momentum. And then everyone's like, this actually is pretty cool. Yeah. I'd rather do this than worksheets.
Yeah. And the teacher isn't just always picking the first kid or the bright maths kids, they really want my ideas. And when I ask a good question, they're like, putting the status on all of those mathematical principles and things like that, rather than just that small amount of students who are fast at maths and get the answer right.
It gets more fun. It becomes more fun, more engaging. Like you walk into a classroom where you're teaching maths in this way, and it's way more vibrant, way more engaging, way more discussion. Yeah. It's so much more exciting to be a part of that than in a classroom where you come in and everyone's heads down working on their own piece of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love it. Like, just my students just, like, I'm cringy a lot of the time, they say, but because I just get so excited when they ask a good question, or if they make a mistake that a few others have made, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. Like, I get and especially when there's like a little bit of a debate about an answer, and I just step back and I've got this huge smile on my face, and they're like, "Oh, Mrs. Gardner,
like, job done."
I love it, really.
That's great. So finally, to wrap it up, in your opinion, what is the future of maths? What does it look like in the classroom?
I read this question before we started, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, I think if I had the magic bullet, I'd be making some money selling it everywhere. I don't know what it is. I think the ministry now has put out this idea of a balanced mathematical approach, having the rich mathematical tasks, but also the direct teaching, the times tables, all in a balanced way. I mean, how you logistically do that in a classroom, again, I trialed quite a few things last year. Like, I'd spend some days doing this and some days doing that. And, I didn't find one way that I was like, yeah, that's the way. I sort of, it's still a work in progress for me, how I would do that logistically with a group of 30 students all working at different levels. Yeah, I don't have the magic bullet, unfortunately.
It is hard. It's just time. And with education, no one wants to be the one that trials for the first time. So they're like, oh, you guys try it over there and that's cool. Let us know how it's going.
Yeah.
And then if it works, you let us know. No one wants to be the risk takers, or not many are willing to be the risk takers.
Yeah.
But I certainly feel like the way or your approach is beneficial, because at least you are aiming to catch those that are falling behind and that are reluctant to engage. So if we can capture more learners and more teachers by default, then it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective and opinion with us. It's been really good to hear your thoughts, and with maths in my own journey, I certainly don't smile as much about it as I do now when I talk to you and I talk to James about it. It's just the way I wish I was taught maths. It would have undone so much of the stuff that I fear now about it. Like, if I had a teacher that was okay with me making mistakes, I would probably enjoy maths and get into it more. or if I had a parent, and we didn't even talk about parents, but if I had a parent that wasn't so rigid, maybe I would have enjoyed maths a bit more too. So,
I mean, that brings me to another thing that I always think the parents have a lot to answer for, because in so many parent interviews, they've said to me, I wasn't good at maths at school, so my child isn't good at maths either. And then it gives this kid like an escape.
Yeah.
I'm not good at maths. It wasn't like, that's my exit. I'm done.
Well, you probably go to the mum for maths because mum's good at maths. So you go see mum's good at maths.
Yeah.
Just feeds all these other things.
You never hear people say, I'm bad at reading. That's okay if you're bad at maths. I don't know. True. Yeah.
It's an easy way out.
Yeah.
We can do a whole another chapter in parents and maths, I feel. It's just we can either continue this for an extra hour, or we can come back in a few weeks and discuss it as a separate topic, because it's so deep as well.
Yeah, I think we might have to explore that one.
I think so, yes.
Well, all right, thanks,
Lauren. Really appreciate it. What do you think your key takeaway was?
From that episode, I think one of the key takeaways that I had was her activities that she talked about, and the bingo activity in particular, such a simple game, but using maths within the bingo board, and then allowing kids to explore, what she said, what do you wonder and what do you notice? So playing a maths game more than once, and then kids taking away something from that, and then building on it, and then trying again, which sort of, stops it from just being a one-stop activity and then move on, so it keeps it quite fresh. And also like the no hands policy that she talked about, so kids just showing their thumbs if they have the answer.
Yeah.
Because that undoes so much stuff that when you're at school, you always knew who was going to put up the hands, but you never necessarily thought about it in the moment. But you just knew, I won't answer that one because Boris over there's got his hand up, and Boris is always getting awards at assembly, so why would I put my hand up and compete with the Austrian Boris? Yeah, don't compete with Boris, there's no point. So, I think little strategies like that, if we can sort of have those become normalized, will sort of undo some of the other stuff that catches up later. So that was my takeaways. What were yours?
For me, it was just highlighting that not everyone sees maths the same way, and that some students need to be celebrated for noticing things in a different way, and not, again, with the no hands policy, like same for you. It creates a space where everyone shares, And I wonder, what do you notice? What I wonder creates healthy conversation around math, as it's not just about the same people getting it right each time. So I think the more we can normalize the fact that we are all different and therefore we all see the same problem in a different way, we can all learn from each other, because it's not just one way of solving the problem. And to me, that just relates to life. Life is the same. We don't all approach the same problem in the same way. And maths it's a lot about problem solving. So to me, that's just very important to highlight, create an environment where everyone can share their ideas and how we can collaborate to problem solve.
That's great. Yeah. And I think, we had so much more that we can delve into, so we might need to get her back and have a follow-up episode.
I think so, yeah. It was a great conversation. I think there's a lot of key takeaways we can certainly carry on for quite a bit longer. So yeah, it's really important that we just normalize the math talks and remove the fear, or at least try and help to remove the fear away from maths.
Yeah. So if you like this conversation, remember to like and subscribe to us or follow us on Spotify. Share it with your colleagues. Share it with people that you think might enjoy this. It's an open topic. So, if you know somebody that has a bad experience of maths, this might be something that sort of changes their mind about it. So share it wide and far, and we'll see where it takes us.
And let us know what questions do you have regarding maths and your own experience about maths teaching in the classroom. What would you like to know? What questions we would like if we brought Lauren back? What would you like us to ask her? So thank you for listening, and we'll see you again for our next episode next week.